Coming up on One Detroit, how local groups are merging forces to make sure people are counted in the 2020 census. Plus,
we're essentially taking what used to be manufacturing for the auto industry and we're turning that into manufacturing of food.
the growing business of growing tiny plants in one Detroit neighborhood. And I catch up with Nolan and Stephen at the Detroit Shipping Company for a debate over this week's headlines. I'm Christy McDonald, and One Detroit is coming up.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV. The Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and by
Business Leaders for Michigan has 5 priorities to make Michigan a top 10 state. Achieve a balanced budget, cut long-term debt, fix our roads, improve all levels of education, further economic growth, plan for a stronger Michigan. How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
For nearly 100 years, Ally has been a part of Detroit, and we give back by volunteering and donating in our community. We have a commitment to diversity and increasing economic mobility in our hometown. At Ally, we're dedicated to doing it right every single day.
And viewers like you. Thank you.
Tell me about the facility. Obviously, the shipping containers are so unique, and it really stands out on the street.
We originally started off with kind of just a hand-drawn picture of 5 rectangles on a napkin and said, what if we had an open-air concept with, food, drink, dessert, and entertainment? It kind of stemmed from date night with my wife. And we'd like to go and just get small bites at a bunch of places.
Yeah.
So it was like, how can we create something that gave us that element of different flavors and different tastes and an experience that you're constantly moving?
How would you go about finding, finding the places, the food places, and the vendor chefs and whatnot?
We wanted people who had business experience, had some staying power, understood how to run a kitchen. Were financially strong enough that we didn't know with sharing a space like this how strong and how much sales would be for each person. We told a lot of the vendors that this isn't where you go to make $1 million, this is where you go to market and sell your business and create a name for yourself.
This is a community space and there's art here. There's just different, really, it's kind of a different vibe here. What have people been telling you?
Well, people love it, right? They love walking around and experiencing it. So when you walk in, you go order your food, and while that's being made, you walk to the bar, you grab a drink. By the time you're done doing that, you haven't sat anywhere. Your food's ready, you grab your food. But then when you're done, you can still be engaged by staying in the place, not just sitting and stagnant, but walk the art gallery, go outside. A lot of times there's live music outside. We have a t-shirt shop, a podcast studio, and things are kind of always active and something to do.
Hi there, and welcome to One Detroit. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining me at the Detroit Shipping Company in Midtown. We have a lot coming up for you on the show. We're going to talk about the 2020 census and how business, nonprofit, and community groups are all trying to work together to get the word out on being counted, even while some people are wary of giving out their information. Plus, a closer look at Planted. It's a hydroponics business on the city's east side, and you may find their plants on your dinner plate sometime soon. Also coming up, a look at the headlines, including Detroit police being criticized for what they say was keeping the peace at the Motor City Pride Parade over the weekend. So let's get started with some of those headlines. Say hello to Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of WDET and American Black Journal. How are you guys?
Well.
Good. There's a lot going on in the news this week, and looking back at the Pride Parade over the weekend, and I ended up seeing more coverage of really the hate groups that were marching alongside, and criticism of Detroit police. Detroit police came out, Nolan, and said, look, we were trying to offset disaster.
And they did a good job.
In what this group, is there anything though different that police need to do or tell the public going on before something like this?
They had 10, 12 troublemakers show up of the white supremacists and about the same number of Antifa, and they're determined to clash. Everywhere they go, they're determined to fight with each other. Detroit police got a heads up on it. They stayed between the two groups and prevented something ugly from happening here. You had these nuts out here with guns. Anything could have happened. And at the end of the day, nothing happened, no violence. Everybody walked away safe. They did their jobs.
Are we going to be seeing more storylines like this playing out around the country?
I don't know. I mean, the idea here is to get attention, right? That's what they want.
And they got it.
Is for people to pay more attention to them than to the thing that they're protesting, and they got it here. I thought DPD did a fine job. Their job is to make sure that this can unfold in a constitutional manner, right? You have a constitutional right to free speech to assemble that way. You don't have a right to say some of the things that they were saying to even the police officers, saying racist things toward the black police officers. You don't actually have a right to say that, and you could have been arrested. I mean, they could have been arrested. That would have elevated things and gotten things out of hand. So I think it was, DPD showed some restraint and said, we're just going to make sure that things don't explode in this kind of powder keg.
You had 50,000 people there, celebrating, having a nice parade, and 20 troublemakers, and they shouldn't get all the attention. And I think the police, Chief Craig, deserves praise rather than criticism here.
You know what, another thing I saw on the news this week, and I really recommend it, was a deep dive in the Detroit News talking about the problems at Benton Harbor, the school district there, and they're looking at closing down the high school and an alternative high school, leaving about 700 kids that would then have to find alternate places to go to school. And to me though, Nolan, when I was reading it, it really kind of struck as a bigger picture of, are we doing the right things for schools that are in trouble, that have financial debt? That's one side, but really the achievement issues. And is the Michigan Department of Education kind of having enough interventions or having the right interventions in place to be able to turn around a school once it gets to a certain point?
Obviously not, because they didn't turn it around. I'm no big fan of the Department of Education, but this is a school where 0% of its 11th graders are ready for college. You're destroying young lives here. You're ruining futures even before these kids' lives begin, and you have to do something. They tried to turn it around, they put plans in place. They don't seem to have any capability of turning that school around. And so why should the kids pay the price? Why should the kids, 3% of third graders could read at grade level. They would be better off staying home watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. You would learn more.
So another question could be, Stephen, now how long do you give a district like that, or a school like that? But then knowing the feelings that many of these students and families have, saying, "Gosh, don't shut down this school. This is our school."
So where you started is where the conversation ought to be, which is what we're doing, and it's not just what we're doing with troubled districts like this. It's what we're doing with education more generally. In this state, the funding for your education is tied to your zip code. This is one of the last states in the union that allows that to be true. Benton Harbor is a place that's lost a lot of population and tax base, so it's no wonder that its schools can't support themselves, can't figure out how to keep the lights on and keep quality instruction in the classroom in a way that makes some sense. Until we start talking about it in those terms, we're shuffling deck chairs, really. You can open schools some places, you can close schools some places, but the truth is that almost every district that's not super wealthy is going to face this kind of problem over the next decade or so as populations change, as we continue to lose population in lots of places of the state. These school districts that we have are not sustainable. It's also true that we have, 477 school districts in a state of 9 million people. That's crazy. The overhead for that is not sustainable either. But we are nowhere near talking about how we might redesign a system that was focused on making sure there's enough money to educate kids, whether they are in Benton Harbor or Bloomfield Hills.
Yeah, you're not even really you haven't even talked about the teachers that would be leaving as well, leaving a district.
Well, there's a lot of things wrong with education in Michigan, and it's not just money. In fact, the money we spend here is comparable to states that are doing much better. There's another story in the Detroit News on Tuesday talking about an Upper Peninsula principal up in Houghton who came in and produced tremendous results in a poor district. He did so by demanding best practices, best education practices, and holding teachers accountable for results. The union pushed back, and he's gone now. So we don't necessarily support reformers and support the things that work.
No, right. I mean, the big problem is that we're ignorant in this state of the examples around the country that would lead us forward, right? There are other states who are doing it differently, doing everything differently, and it is about money. It's always about money. It's not just about money, but it is about money.
They didn't start with money in those places.
I'm sorry.
Tennessee didn't start with money. Florida didn't start with money.
Massachusetts did.
Colorado
Maryland did,
didn't
and they're
start
ahead
with
of all
money.
of those states. So the states that do the best.
Tennessee's
the
ahead
top
of us,
five,
too.
No, the top 5 states nationwide started with funding. They started with the question of how much money do you need to educate a kid who is in an urban environment versus a wealthy environment?
And we have seen studies
We've got
that
a lot of
Michigan needs to
well-funded
spend a little bit
districts in the
more.
bottom 10
But
too.
there's a lot more to it besides funding.
You need
There's
money
a lot more
and
to it.
other things.
All right,
But you need
well,
money.
stay put here for just a moment. All right, we have a closer look now at the growing business of hydroponics that's growing plants indoors on shelves using LED lighting. We first heard about Planted while we were covering stories in Island View on Detroit's east side. Step inside their 20,000 square foot warehouse and it's farming like you've never seen before, but you may be tasting the product at your next restaurant.
We have Planted, growing in a 20,000 square foot warehouse, growing produce every single week to local restaurants. These types of buildings, old warehouses in most cases, with some remodeling and redoing, they're perfect for growing this type of produce. And that type of produce can be grown indoors, hydroponically, vertically, and at a great conservancy of water. We use over 90% less water to grow plants over their life cycle than if we grow them in the ground.
The seed right now that I'm watering is some Genevieve basil.
Within the city of Detroit, there's a lot of viable space. So we're essentially taking what used to be manufacturing for the auto industry and we're turning that into manufacturing of food.
I relate it very much to the same time when Henry Ford was bringing the first Fords off the assembly line. We're sort of at that point, that juncture in the hydroponic industry, in the way that we're innovating and birthing the industry here in the United States.
It was only when I came into this farm and saw how we were growing and how there's really only nutrients added to the water, no pesticide, no herbicide, that I understood that it is actually quite sustainable and is a good additive to the food system to supplement those other local growers that are growing that natural way in soil.
That's the Oregon peas, dwarf gray peas, and then the black oil sunflower seeds.
Starting my business pitch talking about hydroponic systems, I would have to qualify it and say that we are not growing weed, we are growing herbs, but not herb. We're growing vegetables and produce. And I know that from our standpoint, our lighting company was able to really grow its business from the cannabis industry, but that came back to help us launch our business growing produce because they had the money to develop these amazing lights that we now use to grow food to nourish the world. So how about that?
The people that have developed these lights have figured out plants grow more effectively under specific wavelengths of light. So it's actually a combination of red and blue wavelengths that they grow under. So that actually gets us a pretty consistent reduction in growth time compared to full spectrum light out in the field.
We are selling herbs, baby greens, and microgreens to our local chefs that are interested in bringing some really flavorful, interesting products to the plate.
Brujo pea shoots ×4.
This is green shiso. It's a small microgreen. We also grow these leaves to full size. It's kind of a cross the flavor between something like basil, and it also has a very floral flavor. It's really fragrant, and it's used in a lot of mixed drinks, and also as a garnish.
A lot of chefs just saying, hey, we're looking for this type of product, this category. We can't get it from other local growers, or we can in the summer, but then in the winter we have a gap in local supply. And then bringing that information back to the farm so that we could start to grow exactly the produce that those chefs want to buy.
So this is going to Maru downtown. And then we also sell this in an herb size, so the full size leaf. So same plant, we just let it grow a little bit longer. Right. And now we just hope we don't get a big gust of wind.
Thank you.
A whole bunch of baby greens coming in.
We do.
The good thing about microgreens are not
a salad. They're not something you just put on the plate to like make it look nice. No, you use a microgreen to actually enhance the flavor of something. For us here at the sushi bar, we want our salmon to taste, hey, like if you want to give a minty taste to my salmon, like let me add a shiso, like a little micro shiso. It'll pop, it'll make it pop. If you want something more on the spicier side, we will add like a radish sprout. You know what I'm saying? So that would change the flavor of the salmon.
We started selling at Eastern Market. So we're going to be about 50-50 in terms of sales, which is very exciting to see a lot of traction at Eastern Market for these, what I always say, weird things that we're growing here. Like they're not the typical iceberg lettuces of the world. We're growing really interesting varietals, and Michiganders that are coming to the market are so stoked to have that in their refrigerator.
We love Eastern Market. We had the opportunity to start selling here in the winter months when they actually need more vendors like us to provide fresh greens in a time when most gardeners aren't growing them. We do a lot of explaining about hydroponic growing, how we grow produce. Some people come with the knowledge that we're here in the city and they just want to taste our produce and talk farming with us, which we love to do. Other people come and taste the products and ask us how we're growing it, because the products do have a very distinctive taste and look, a real consistent color. It's a very interesting combination between technology and farming, for sure. It's a very different way of growing food, but one of the things that we all notice here is that it still has that life-giving effect on you to be in our growing room with literally thousands of plants growing at the same time, growing all around you. There's something that's very affirming and very joyful and life-giving to know that we're creating food people are going to eat and enjoy and be nourished by.
And finally, 2020 is coming faster than we realize, and there's a big push to get people ready to participate in the census. Our population total determines a lot: how much federal funding our state receives, our representation, and even as we wait for the Supreme Court to rule in the next few weeks over adding a controversial citizen question to the census, local groups statewide are trying to merge resources and efforts to get people counted. I spoke with Donna Murray-Brown, the CEO of Michigan Nonprofit Association, Hassan Jaber, the Executive Director of Access, and Nancy Moody, Vice President of Public Affairs with DTE Energy, about the work they're doing.
The census actually is the one moment in time that we can count people to make certain that we have enough federal funding here in the state of Michigan to be able to provide those things. That's why it's so important for nonprofit organizations who depend on financing to be able to help them continue to do the work that they're doing. So it's a lot at stake in terms of not just dollars, but also making certain that we have good representation from the state of Michigan and in the federal government as well. And so we're really interested in making sure that we are able to leverage the trust that nonprofits have in community to make certain that people recognize the importance of being counted, mattering, and being able to make a difference in the communities where they live.
You know, you just said something really interesting. You said leverage the trust. And I think that sometimes that's where we're seeing a breakdown of people in the community that don't quite trust the process and the counting process and what that will mean for communities. Hassan, what are some of the challenges that you're hearing from people about concern about being counted or not being counted?
And the trust is a key issue here. And knowing the process, knowing why this has been done and how it benefits communities and people, especially in an age where privacy is now a major concern for everyone. There are also the fact that this citizenship question was added last minute in an political environment where immigrants are feeling being targeted, and they're very significant a group to be included in the census. So privacy, moving to internet census this year or in 2020, the fact that there are these citizenship question and what it means to immigrant communities.
And there's real concern there.
And there are real concerns about this. We could lose a significant populations in account if we don't address this issue. So we do have challenges. The task for us is to be transparent, honest, trusting, in terms of how we communicate these challenges and how we as a community can come together and do the job of complete count. This is critical for us. 40% of state budget is federal money based on the census numbers.
And Nancy, it's really starting to get these programs and get the word out and say, how can we partner with nonprofits? How can we partner with other organizations and say, all right, we can never get the word out too much. And it's a constant process. So what are some of the plans on how we can start to get the word out and what you're doing at DTE?
Well, I'm glad you asked the question. There are many things that businesses can do. One of the things is provide resources. So you can provide both time, talent, and treasure. That's what I like to call it. It's financial resources so that you can actually pay for the services that you need to get the campaigns, because this is a door-to-door campaign with the folks who are trusted, to come to the door. And getting the word out through every kind of media channel you can come up with. And today, with digital media, there are so many ways for us to speak to the folks in the state of Michigan.
Which is kind of a good thing and kind of a bad thing too, because you think, maybe 20 years ago you could put on mainstream television, but now our eyeballs are in so many different places.
Yes.
I mean, you can get the information in so many different places that, well, that's a wonderful thing. That can also be a little bit of a challenge too.
We need to do it all
for
this, because it is so important for the next 10 years in Michigan. This is so important. And the third thing I would say businesses can do is use our own employees, our own retirees, we call them our alumni, and our own contract assistants. Use every resource you have everywhere in order to help get the word out. Word of mouth. Basically becoming a volunteer in your own neighborhood. I mean, there are many ways, and at least at DTE, we absolutely intend to use them all. We partner with our nonprofits. We partner with our faith partners. We have partners across the state of Michigan, and we'll be using every channel.
So it's going to be crucial to see what the count is going to be.
It's everything for a state like Michigan. It's everything for a city like Detroit. The money that's tied to it, the representation. If you don't get it, you spend the next 10 years on the road.
Yeah.
When I first started covering politics in Michigan, we had 18 congressional districts. We're down to 14. We'll probably lose another one. Our goal should be, that's it. We go no lower.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. It's good to see you guys. All right. And that is going to do it for One Detroit. We'll be back next Thursday. Catch us then. Take care.